call the city council work session order. Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilperson Lamore,
Here.
Felder,
Excused.
Whitman,
Here.
Echoangeli,
Here.
Vining,
Here.
Germaini,
She's excused.
Mayor Clark.
Here. We have a work session this evening before the council meeting, and there are several items which I'll turn right over to our city manager to get started on our conversation.
Thank you, Your Honor. First item I would like to start with discussion is the Walnut Street drainage issue. I provided a brief update on my manager's update over the weekend talking about that. I have a handout that I asked city engineer Patrick Lewis to prepare for me regarding how far this issue actually goes back. And they put in there it's genuinely real. And I will mention Patrick won't be here tonight. He's fighting, sounds like the flu tonight. So at this point, you know, certainly Patrick and I and some of the staff at the DPS have been there, as well as the city attorney, Matt Buds, and I made a visit there a week ago, Friday on that. And clearly we have a problem. There's no doubt about it. Somewhere between and combination of engineering and legal related issues that will need to be resolved. But tonight we have Felicia Overstreet. She's the daughter of the property owner there on 822 Walnut. We've been talking with her mother over a period of time, last couple of years since I've been here. Obviously, based on the chronology, this has been going on for some time. And I don't know if you wish to talk to the mayor, if that's okay, if she council. So I'm not even sure where you go though.
Right here.
Over here.
Oh.
Next to the clerk. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. So this is, like you said, is a really big issue. My parents have been homeowners of this house for 35 years, since I was like 5 months old, and my whole childhood, me and my brother have been able to play in the backyard. The last 15 years have just been unreal. It's a lot of standing water. You can just imagine the weeds now are taller than me. I am 5'9", and it's so bad it does not dry out. It can be the hottest summer and it would not dry out. So you can just imagine the standing water. What comes with standing water? Mosquitoes. You got mosquitoes, you got every other animal out there. My neighbor has set plenty of traps to catch everything. She's got grandchildren. I have 2 kids that cannot even go in my parents' backyard because of the animals back there. The mosquitoes. You go outside, you're instantly attacked with the mosquitoes. And this has been going on. My son is 9. I have not had a gathering in my parents' backyard since then because it's so bad. She's had made, as you can see, numerous of complaints. Just trying to get somebody to come out and take a look at it, you know. We invite people to come over, have a picnic, you know. This is what we used to do. This is what they enjoy to do. They're homeowners for a reason. Why buy a home if you cannot utilize your property? We're just asking for some help, you know, from the city. They never had this problem before. In that area, and Vince took a look at it, at that area is where my dad had his garden. My dad loves his gardens. Kelly, you know how my dad loves gardens. It's gotten so bad to where it rains and it floods, and last 15 years, we could not do that. And just that huge area is just swamped with water. You know, my neighbor used to come and try to plow it for my mom because, you know, she's elderly. She's in her 60s. She's got health issues. She can't do it. I can't do it. He comes down there with a tractor and he gets stuck. So he stopped doing it. But that was the only way for us to clear some of that debris out of there. And my brother comes, he has to weed whack, but he's swamped up to like his ankles in mud. To where you have to, at some point you have to stop. And we can't get back there. So we're just asking you guys to come back, take a look at it. How would you like your mother, your father, how would you like your backyard to look? I'm sure you wouldn't like it to look like that. You look out your window, all you see is weeds. You can't look past it. So I'm just asking, you know, it's been 15 years. We've made numerous complaints, a petition. We're just tired of it going unheard, you know. I just don't understand. I'm becoming a homeowner. I want to become a homeowner. But I don't want to become a homeowner if this is how, this is the resolution. You know, I don't see a resolution. It's been 15 years, you know, and enough is enough. And I seriously think something needs to be done, and in a timely manner. It seems like she's constantly getting a runaround. They were saying next summer, next winter, next whatever, we'll get out there, clean it out, and it has not been done yet. So I'm just asking, on behalf of my parents, that something is out there, something's done. It's not just my parents, it's my neighbors as well. They're affected too. It's just their land is much lower. So all that water just runs down and just is stagnant in their backyard. You can just imagine over the years just what's back there. So this is a big concern. You know, my mother has health issues, so I'm worried about her health as well because she has to go in and out. And so it's not pretty, you know. And I've invited you guys, you know, to come take a look at it.
If I may, Mayor, and, you know, Ms. Overstreet and I, you know, I have her number, and I will contact her, and her mother had offered, anytime I wanted to walk back there, that's fine. I prefer just I'll offer it up to council members. I gladly take you to take a drive over there real quick. I'll give her a text message, say we're gonna be here, and she's fine with that as well, and so, but I think long term, in the short run, one of the things we'll talk with DPS about is make sure we keep those, briquettes, into the water area to try and, kill the mosquito larvae, for that area. And there is an issue from an engineering and even probably from a legal standpoint, how we get to the permanent solution for that. I anticipate, and I'm looking at, around to see Mr. Buds, but you'll probably receive some correspondence from him here in the future, related to, he's doing some research related to what we think the problem to be. Can't go into any more detail that, other than in the short run, we'll, you know, put some more briquettes out there, make sure we can try and keep the mosquitoes down, the best that we can, and then I'll contact you when I have, you know, council members available to just let you know we'll be back there and walk it, so.
Okay. Yeah, and one of the things, I just asked, you know, I just don't want it to take another 5 years. You know, my thing is, can this be done timely?
Your Honor, I got a question if you can.
Sure. John?
Looking at the chronology that Pat Lewis put together, the second, third, and fourth bullet point kind of give me concern that construction of the Monroe Crossing condominiums, they indicated that the dredging that was required per the approved plan was never done. So the question I have for the attorney is, as part of his research, because the plan was not done per approval, does the city have the ability to go in and specially assess the Monroe Crossing condominiums for the cost of completing the stormwater improvements that were supposed to be made as part of that development?
Mr. Mayor, for me? So all of the issues are being explored. Obviously, that being one that's on there is something that's in play as well, looking at all the contributions to the water situation and all the possible resolutions.
Okay, thank you.
Good, further, or, thank you for being here. For
Thank
the
you.
review. I know that, putting this together, there's some things that are recognizable that, I believe the city manager and the city attorney will be, taking steps on to hopefully, get, some other actions that weren't done before.
Thank you.
Best do.
Your Honor, the next item is, discussion regarding, boards and commissions, so kind of leave that open-ended with, yourself and council to go through some of that.
Sure, I'll start. I had sent an email to the city manager, just a follow-up to our previous conversations regarding boards and commissions and finding residents as to serve on boards and commissions. Recently, council taken some actions. There were adjustments on some of the councils, or some of the commissions, specifically zoning board of appeals, traffic committee, in relation to the size of the board and reduction numbers, which were not necessarily a quorum issue, as necessarily having full boards, which certain people appearing before those boards had the opportunity to have a full board. The HDC and the DDA, we've addressed some of the items there as well. And there'll be some DEA appointments this year as well. So in my email, when I sent, and I know that the city manager forwarded on the council, there was still one that we discussed about on the Citizens Planning Commission. That's currently a 9-person board, and there was discussion, do we review that commission as well? And is it feasible or make sense to reduce that to a 7-person board, making sure, at least one thought was, do we ensure still with our precincts being represented? And then the other is over the past couple of years was I had put in my email was the Recreation Advisory Commission. Not so necessarily the size, but as we move forward in some of the functions of that, we have several, there's a 7-member board, but 5 since last year are due up for, and this year are due for reconsideration for appointment. So it's an opportunity to have the discussion there as well. We also, as a council, did talk about where we may be going and some of our goals and objectives for some potential ad hoc committees, one being the Arts and Culture Committee. So I'm throwing a lot out here, but just reviewing more than some of our discussions were. And June is the month when it comes up for some of our appointments. The others are in January. And I have those lists of appointments that are coming due, and there's different amounts. One in one board, maybe 2 or 3 in another. So that's kind of a review that I asked the city manager to put back on. If the council had some input or discussions they wish to have, I think we should start with the Planning Commission and Recreation. Just what are your thoughts now, and maybe something I also thought is that we want to give the city administration the opportunity to come back and maybe give a review of some of these boards, how they're functioning today as opposed to maybe when they were intended, and what do we look at in the future. So that's my foundation for a start. I'm open to, this is an opportunity just to give some more feedback as a council. Councilwoman, planning.
I know you've spoken about trying to get the library advisory committee. I wonder, would that fit under the arts and cultural, since we have a problem sometimes getting the library advisory commission together. I wonder, could that be put under that banner?
Sure. And that's on, I did have that in my email. I didn't get to that part yet because I think that might be a longer term discussion. I think that I recall as I started my service with the city here, early on, the discussion about the Monroe County library system and how they function and how they collect the revenues from the cities and the townships throughout the county and how those are expended. I think it's a broader discussion to start with. And then we had a library commission that just kind of found its way, that it really wasn't active in making decisions, and I think the structure was part of that. So it's kind of we don't have a library advisory commission at this time. I agree though, Kelly, that we should. And I think first maybe we need to revisit our discussions with the county and the library system and how that revenue is collected and how it's expended and how those agreements are. But I agree that we definitely need to resurrect that for both of our libraries. I've said that from the beginning. Our whether it be Dorsch or Navarre, one and the other are equal in what our actions should be. And I don't think we should act with one without consideration to the other. So I think there's some foundational things. I appreciate you bringing that up. It was in the email as well. Brian.
Yes, in regards to the Citizens Planning Commission, I think in the past I've asked for some attendance records of the Citizens Planning Commission as to who's at the meetings, who's not, what precincts are being taken care of. If we can get some of those records, that may help in our decision-making for the CPC board.
I had those as we looked at this in January and early on in February. I'll give an update on that as far as the most recent meetings. As far as the Planning Commission, as I said, there's 9 members currently, but we've had a couple that have asked to step away from the Planning Commission. So we're really down to 7 currently. But we don't have that in our chamber. Just joking. That's okay. We just had a phone on. But so we're down to 7 members. However, one of our precincts, currently the 6th precinct, is not represented. There is a representative, but he is asked for a replacement to step away from the Planning Commission. So then if that person comes back from the 6th, we then have 8. So we have a couple that are, one, if we go to 7, if that was discussed, we'll have some decisions to make there as well. So that's kind of where we're starting, but I'm open to thoughts on the 9, 7, representing each precinct. They can select their own chairperson. I don't want to make it too complicated where we start going real selective, and then that person, whatever reason departs, it makes it more challenging to find someone. John?
Your Honor, I guess my suggestion on the CPC would be we go to 7 members, 6 represent each one of the precincts. And it would be good to have the 7th member come from one of the other committees, like the Brownfield Authority, the Downtown Development Authority, Parks and Rec, just for kind of getting some additional input on what those committees are doing. So that's my thought. The other thought on the Rec Advisory Board, we should probably take a look at the number of members. I know that the Rec Advisory Board has had a problem with periodically with attendance. People kind of start and then they drop off and don't show up, which just complicates. Loretta's had to cancel meetings because of lack of quorum. So I know that some of our bylaws basically say something like if they miss 2 or 3 consecutive meetings. I think we have to be a little bit stricter. If they miss 2 or 3 meetings a year, then I think it would be grounds for someone to be pulled off a board and somebody else put back on. Otherwise, it just complicates the management of the boards with people always being absent.
You know, speaking of the Parks and Recreation, I mean, when you look at it, it says Recreation Advisory Commission.
Yeah.
It doesn't say Parks.
Right.
And so it's really about activities and recreation, and that's where I think it's time really to revisit the entire commission is what is the role and function we're asking them to do. As we look past in the past couple of years, they've been asked actually to have input on the parks and the master planning and some decisions there. So maybe just being a recreation advisory, we're shifting from the recreation part. Well, that's important, should be a component. We probably should revisit from the beginning and get the bylaws out and look at that. That's my thought there. I'm kind of leaning your way, John, on the number. We have 7. We're finding that the ZBA and the traffic committee are, since we've made those changes to 5 members, are actually functioning very well. They're functioning with full attendance. Get a thank you I want to pass along to the council from the chairperson of the Zoning Board of Appeals. The meetings are not vacant of attendance, and they're getting things done quickly. So they just want to pass along his thanks for the change. So I think that's a possibility when you look at recreation. Really, an opportunity to start over with what we're asking those members to do for the city and what representation what they're making their decisions on. So thanks for that. Other comments?
I guess I like the idea of maybe having the city administration take a look at the composition of the committees in regards to what our goals and objectives are, so there's complete alignment. I also like Kelly's idea because it's awful hard finding a lot of volunteers. I like her idea about having an arts, cultural, and library advisory board because many times the libraries are also used as art galleries, art exhibitions. So it'd be kind of interesting to have all 3 of those pulled together in one group. I like that. It's a good idea.
Yeah, and I think that's where that comes in. We're having the administration pull these that we're talking about, pull them back together, bring them in here, and maybe start getting to some of the details there that maybe not be pertinent today, and how can we form those and use our residents that are our volunteers to the best use, and with maybe some connectivity between those. John, just because I was writing down as you're talking on the planning commission, maybe the other member you said Brownfield Rec and
or DDA or Port Authority.
Yeah. And it might be an item where that we look at all of those and come with a selection of one of them as the additional person that we are having one from each precinct, and then you have that crossover which we're looking for with many of our boards and commissions and some of the activities. So it's a good idea too. I appreciate that on having the administration look at that. I think it's important that we visit from the beginning of what we had. How does it fit within what ordinance? Is it something that's in the charter? How do we have to revisit those and make sure we get it done correctly? Other comments on Brian? Yeah.
Yes, Your Honor. I agree that Kelly has a great suggestion in combining the Art and Cultural Committee with the Library Committee. I think that's a very good idea. It is difficult finding quorums for some of these committees, and I think that would be a very good idea to do that. I still would like to see the statistics on the CPC before I make some kind of informed decision on that, because I think that is imperative to decide whether or not, I don't think they've had a problem with quorum, and maybe that's because of the mix of having 9 people on the board. I'd like to see the statistics before I make that decision, though.
Yeah, I think any data that we have should be made available so we can think about how we make those decisions. It's not like we're trying to change every board and every commission, but we're really trying to use the personnel and our residents to the best possible use. Just as, unless there's other comments, I just want to also review, just to give you an idea of those that are coming up in June. And I think some of the conversations we talked about, while we may not necessarily have to make those appointments immediately, I think we make them with the right foundation before we make them. However, a few that are coming up that have members that are due or vacancies that will occur on the Downtown Development Authority. I do have some contacts out, Lake Erie Transit, the Commission on the Environment. There's 2 appointments there that are up for reconsideration. The Port Commission has 2, as well as the Recreation Advisory I mentioned. I mention those because those are June appointments. While not all of them necessarily have to be made, I'm not going to hold recommendations to the council on those that we have people that want to serve. But I could see where we will have to keep moving along. And Brownfield still has a vacancy that's not been filled. And I understand one of our members on the Local Officers Compensation Commission is moving from the city. That's not important because that won't come up till next year. That they actually serve once every 2 years is when they meet prior to an election. I looked in my notes. I think in Historic District Commission we had a departure there, and I've received 2 or 3 messages of interest. So I don't think we'll be challenged to fill that. I just want to give a review where those commissions are at and get your input regarding specifically, and I appreciate that. I have the notes here on the CPC, Recreation, and now the library was also on the list. So. Other thoughts or concerns at this time? We'll have the administration look into some of those. What's the best path to get to those? So you will be seeing some recommendations for appointments at one of the, or both potentially the June meetings, but it won't necessarily be on all of these at this time until we get that data together. Thank you for your input.
If I may, Your Honor, just recap where we're going with this. My notes are with the CPC, attendance records update. We're looking at possibly 7 members, 1 per precinct. Last one coming from DDA, Brownfield, Port, or Parks. Regarding the parks, consideration to reduce the membership from 7 to a number, and along with that, I'll review the bylaws. And then there was some comment regarding expanding from recreation advisory to consider parks. And then clearly the arts, cultural, and library, and again, reviewing that in the context of our goals and objectives, and then provide, from my end of it, a broader review of the boards and commissions throughout. So those are the notes I had taken from this. So.
Very good, thank you. Vince, next item.
Next item is, with the update I sent you, I provided a draft outline regarding the ALCC lease and funding agreement. And this is kind of in the context of the discussion that had taken place during the budget process, where initially I had recommended a $70,000 cut, and ultimately it was put back in, but with the understanding that there is some tasks that would need to be addressed later this year, and the rest and remaining would be available. The first $70,000 certainly covering the first 6 months, and then determination regarding the remaining. So I think for simplicity purposes, I did attach a copy of both the ALCC lease agreement with the city, and then also the strategic plan that was adopted last year by both the ALCC and City Council as well, and using that context for developing what we have tonight. To keep the lease agreement, and I did, again, I'll just, for context, talked with the Finance Committee last week, last Thursday night, going through some of this. The new chairman is out in the audience for the ALCC, but what's proposed is a 2-year agreement starting July 1st, 2018, running through June 30th, 2020. I would keep it the same in all material respects. The only thing I would maybe change is the definition of what a capital expenditure is, reduce it from 10,000 to 5,000. And I'll talk a little bit about that tonight later on when we talk about maybe a budget amendment for some of the boiler improvements that have taken place this year. So from a funding standpoint, there would be 2 agreements, one the lease agreement, the second being a funding agreement. And, obviously the first 70,000 appropriation would cover July 1st through December 31. And then the remainder would be released in whole or in part based on satisfactory completion of the following. And what I had done was kind of taken some of the tasks, many of them identified in the strategic plan. Some of them are organizational, board governance related. Some of them are administrative, and then reporting requirements, and then community outreach. And so, as I went through it with the organizational, board governance, an update, bylaws, I put a date out there to be completed by August 30th. And as I talked last week with the Finance Committee, the full board, we certainly want their input. I'm putting a draft out here for conversation. But to update the bylaws by the end of August 30th, certainly focusing, define duties and responsibilities for board members, and define the relationship with board and staff. The second part is maybe a board governance workshop to be completed maybe by September 30th. And I think, in some ways it's just helpful to keep everyone apprised what's their duties and responsibilities. Certainly from my end of it, I would probably look to having Mr. Cochran, Terry Beamsley with the Battlefield Foundation had, indicated to Mark she'd be willing to do that. And I know Florence Buchanan's done a lot of work locally with boards and their governance. And so, from our end of it, we would look to maybe set up a session there to kind of walk through some of the duties and responsibilities that go along with it. In some ways, as I'm looking at it, it might even be better to do this in advance of the update of the bylaws. But I do think it's something that we could facilitate with the city in that regard. Next is the 2017 audit to be completed by August 30th. They do provide, last year's audit was completed in August, so if they stay on schedule, no problem there. And then proposed budget to be completed by November 30th. The ALCC functions on a January 1st fiscal year, so it's kind of fitting with where they're going. Certainly from their end of it, goals and objectives for 2019 related to the proposed budget, much like what we do a review for the council's goals and objectives for the 2-year budget that we do. And then in their case, with the ALCC, look at having a 3-year budget projection, including a funding campaign. So at that point, they hopefully will be further along down there to give that a lot more consideration. From an administrative standpoint, there's an updating of the job descriptions to be completed by August 30th. And then policies and procedures. And I look at that and I listed, I think, 6 of them, and going from ranging initially from fairly easy to a little more complicated, but doing one a month other than the first month. The vehicle usage policy, I'd heard that from some members, having that completed by the end of July. Ethics policy, I think in some ways simply just take our policy, maybe adopt it by reference, but you've got something there to work with. Hours of operation, again, some concern expressed to me, minimal staffing requirements, at least have that in place. It's a good security as well as a good risk management policy for consideration. Update the employee manual by the end of September. background checks for employees, volunteers, and policy related to that by the end of October. And then financial purchasing, internal controls policy by the end of November. So the first, there would cover a lot of the administrative and organizational board governance related items that were identified in the strategic plan. From a reporting standpoint, quarterly presentations to council beginning in September. Maybe monthly submittals, written and quantitative, just what are the non-routine uses, maybe develop some sign-in procedures to do the accounting for activity at the ALCC. And then the last component is community outreach. And again, I italicized the exact language that was in the strategic plan, which is develop a list of prospects for partnerships and sponsorships. And so I broke that into 3 different areas. Just develop the list to be completed by August 30th. Again, I would offer some facilitation for that assignment, just to kind of walk through it. And I broke it into, in that case, into 2 subcategories. One, funding, like one-time donations, somebody interested in a specific project, and then ongoing program partnerships and sponsorships that would be ongoing. Look to have all the contacts initiated by November, whether it's an introductory letter, request to meet. From my past experience, you get them out there, and there's parties that are not interested based on the list of prospects, and then look to schedule a follow-up meeting to see if there's a way to do that. And then lastly, provide a status report. It has a December city council meeting. But this part of the community outreach, I think, is long-term. When I was talking about the need to expand, the use of revenue stream coming into the LCC to give it that long-term financial stability and viability that we think is important. So, and then lastly, I just broke it down into what's the quarterly presentations to the city council, the one on September 17th and then the one on December 17th as well. It just takes what has been recommended previously and then put those into the reporting back to the city council on those dates, just to monitor the progress. So again, I put this draft together, talked a little bit about it with the finance committee at the LCC last Thursday, and wanted to throw it out for city council for comments and see where it goes.
Thanks, Vince. Good review. I know that information was provided. I know you've had some conversations with, as you said, with the board committee. Comments from council? John?
Thanks. Vince, on the lease agreement, are we gonna pattern that like the Sawyer House, where the city is gonna be, I think on the Sawyer House, we pay for the utilities, and we pay for major maintenance.
Yeah.
So we're gonna pattern it the same.
But they also send us money as well.
But they send,
Yeah.
but they send us $5,000 a year?
Yeah, exactly. And we use that for capital maintenance.
For capital maintenance?
Yep.
But we'll pattern it the same way.
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay.
Yeah. And they have requested that, at least with the utilities, so.
Other, Kelly?
With this list, there are several things on here that are already completed or near completion. So a lot of this should be pretty easy, and then some of it does get a bit more difficult. So I think, at least as far as I'm concerned, we'll be leaning on you for some guidance in
That's
some of
understood.
these areas. The utilities, as far as my conversations with the finance committee, saving some on those utilities were gonna be a big part of how we were going to be able to do some of the administrative and organizational restructuring to be able to carry out a lot of these directives. So any help that we can get with the utilities is gonna help us to be able to meet some of these other standards, in my opinion, at least. So, but it definitely looks doable. with a lot of focus and hard work.
Other comments?
John?
Brian?
Yes, do we know if they have reached out for any corporate help or sponsorship to this point?
I think there's been some, but I'm not sure to what formal extent it has been.
I know,
Kelly?
I know the director has been, Anthony Hoskins, he's been meeting with some of the other major nonprofits, such as MCOP, DTE Foundation, the Lazy Boy Foundation. I haven't gotten a final report back on those meetings at this point. As far as any like major corporate sponsors, I'm not sure. I don't know of any personally.
Thank you. I think that's part of what, one of the items is, as you look through here, it talks about that. It's, that number 4 on outreach, and those list of prospects that were within the structure of some of the objectives. So I think that's an item that continue to follow up on, and if there's items that there has been outreach, or at least share with council or the city manager, make sure we get those to the board as well. John?
I think, you know, what Vince has laid out, I think is going to be very important for the future of the ALCC. And part of this is that if you make an ask to the foundation, depending on the foundation, they're going to ask for some of the information that's outlined in this list. They're going to ask for a copy of the audit. They may ask for ethics policy. They may ask for internal purchasing policies. They may look at board governance documents. I mean, it really depends on the foundation that they ask for, depending on what their requirements are. But this is going to help, I think, a lot in terms of getting them into a position where they can go and make the ask at the foundation. My other question is, Vince, you obviously have somebody in mind that may be in the administrative staff that may provide some assistance to them.
Oh, I think there's certainly a commitment from Mr. Cochran and myself in different capacities to work, depending on which area that some expertise is needed. Candidly, how busy Mark is, I may have to step in a little more frequently. So, yeah, I think the expectation is, certainly there'll be some staff assistance to help, and with some of the policies, he said, look, we'll get you some ideas. You may have to discuss on the finer points of those policies and procedures, but we can give you some examples out there for consideration. The one thing in talking with the finance committee, and I'm going to go off script here a little bit on the outline is, just I think in some ways, aligning some of the skill sets and responsibilities with the personnel. There has been some discussion, regarding, having maybe an individual that would be more focused, supplementing the executive director in the capacity to help with some of the fundraising and partnership development, that type of thing. I will tell you, internally, I've given some thought how we might be able to possibly do that. And I say possibly, maybe utilizing CDBG for a couple of years. We are struggling with some of those program parameters, and even if we were able to find a way to make it work, we still couldn't do anything with it until the program begins in October. And this last year, I don't think we got our notice of approved funding until almost after the first of the calendar year. So it was 3 months into it before even that approval. So that may provide them some additional help and guidance, and we would have to have additional discussion here at the council level whether that's the direction you want to go. But we've had some of those dialogue, and I'm struggling with trying to make it fit the CDBG program parameters with all the other obligations that are contained therein. But I think from a long-term standpoint, getting that alignment may be beneficial as well. So.
Other questions or comments? more as we move along. Vince, I think there's next item is somewhat related.
Yeah, this item I talked about probably the better part of 3 months ago. Back in December, there was some issues with, unfortunately, I couldn't find out the copies that I had of their expenses related to some of their boiler repairs. But they did come a little bit over $5,000, certainly within the parameters of the lease agreement that they have. So from my end of it, I had our building department who does a lot of the facilities maintenance for other facilities take a look at it, and we clearly are going to be looking at a boiler, new boiler for the ALCC here in the next few years. So, you know, I was surprised that the price was not as high as I thought, but it was going to be in excess of $20,000. But we know that we're going to incur that, and candidly, it looks like there is some legitimacy to the additional repairs that they needed to do, and I'll be comfortable recommending to the city council that when we do our year-end budget amendment, we put an additional $5,000 into their appropriation to cover the additional repairs that they had related to the boiler. And that kind of triggers also part of my rationale for the capital maintenance related item, is to drop that threshold from 10 to 5. But clearly there is an issue. The other part of it is our building department is looking at a replacement of the roof. They've had some leaks, and the roof is almost 18 years old now, and that's a reasonable life expectancy for that. So we're probably going to be looking at some means of doing that probably after the first of the year. It'd be nice to do it before the end of the fiscal year as from a financing standpoint, but we also have that capital maintenance expenditure that's going to be coming down the pike. But I am comfortable recommending to do a 5,000 plus 5,000 budget amendment to the ALCC for the related to the boiler repairs that took place this last winter.
Comments from council? Yes, as it comes forward.
I have a question for Vince. Is our CDBG money for fiscal year or calendar year 2019, has that been already committed, or is that subject to, is that going to be subject to program?
We're committed through this 17, we're in the 17-18 program. The 18-19 would start this October. We will in fact have a public hearing at our next meeting on June 4th. There will be opportunities to amend that.
But is that where we're making commitments already for the labor park? Is that in?
Oh yeah, we have some of that in there as well.
In there?
Yes.
Do we have any room in there?
Well, we're looking at potentially additional $47,000 in additional funds this year, surprisingly. And so we're going to, at the staff level, look at what kind of movement within the programming we may be able to make for that. But yes, we do have money programmed for both this year and next year for Labor Park.
Well, because when the boiler expense, and I'm assuming the replacement of the roof would be CDBG eligible.
It's funny, I hadn't contemplated that. We'll see what, although we're doing when we talk tonight about the Dorsch Library, we're moving some resources around to cover the additional, I don't know, $25,000 to see that it gets done. So.
It's just for clarification, as you said, there's additional 40,000. We obviously had a request, but what came back from the federal program and the CDBG actually is additional revenue.
Additional above and beyond last
we
year.
had not expected, but it appears to be coming to the city. But then, as Vince also said, by the time we got through the program or through the process and got here, it was much later in the year. It makes it challenging for the council to decide what programs to get revenue when you have a number it says you're going to get, and you have to make sure you do receive it before you start looking at some of those items as well. So optimistic that it will come, the additional revenue that might be able to fill some of these needs as we go forward with the ALCC.
If I may, I'm looking out at Mr. Green in the audience. I'm not sure exactly when we would need to adopt the CDBG budget, but I'm guessing it's probably August.
It'll be later this year.
Okay, so this preliminary public hearing that we have gives us still plenty of time for more dialogue at the council level, how we would look to allocate those resources, so. Going back to my recommendation on the 5,000, is there any concern or issue with that?
Let's see.
Okay. So when Mr. Saul works on his year-end budget amendment, we'll look to make that, incorporate that with that step there, so, okay. I got a couple other things if I can go through them.
Yes, please do.
Clerk Treasurer was asking me why I was laughing before the meeting. Patrick Lewis, although he's ill today, got word that we had over $73,000 in the remaining items for the auction, which, you know, far exceeded what I thought we would get. But so we're pleased in that. And one of the more nettlesome items was the turf. We paid a pretty handsome sum for that, and we reduced the price on it this morning to encourage it, and far exceeded what the minimum price ended up, because nobody would bid on it. It was initially 15, it went down to 10, and it ended up a little over 20. So there was a little bit of wheeling and dealing at the end, but we'll give you a breakdown as to what that final is. And if you recall, when you authorized the auction, those are final. Unlike the bids that we did earlier, where we think we got a little over $37,000 for more of the hockey-related items. So, the other item is just to let the council know I've got this past week the retiree healthcare, or not retiree healthcare, but the retiree pension board approved a redistribution of the assets, having a favorable impact on our general fund. And the significance of it is that, as you know, we had been in negotiations with all of our bargaining units, reaching tentative agreements with our public safety officers, the command officers, as well as the COMIA 2 group, which is primarily general employee supervisors. And so with those ratifications conditioned upon that actually happening, I'll bring that to the city council for the June 4th meeting. Although I don't usually publicly go into too much discussion about labor matters, we still have 3 outstanding, one with the firefighters, and we're waiting on some more information to respond to a request for an item they had. And then the Teamsters and the COMIA 1 group, which is the general employees, are still outstanding. And related to that tonight, because we're short a couple of council members, I'm going to ask that the council tonight amend the agenda to drop the closed session. I can save that for another meeting when everybody's present. So, the other items, is there anything on the agenda tonight the council had any questions regarding? It's a pretty light agenda, but.
So the items that were on the council, well, the actions will come forward to us, and also on the agenda that there may be inquiries of the administration prior to the meeting.
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Brian?
Right off the bat, let's, if we can just get a little bit more information on the first one up for council action 2014.
Oh, okay. The intent tonight is, before we start that, I would have Utilities Director Barry LaVoy was planning on just giving a brief presentation to City Council regarding the 2 items that are proposed for change here with the water ordinance.
And this will be schedule the public hearing and the second reading in the meeting to come. But it just lays the foundation for Director LaVoy to give us a little background. And then we'll have 2 weeks, council will have, if there's questions or things the administration could send us forward for his presentation this evening also.
If I may ask, is there a question related, there's only the 2 items, is it the cross-connection inspection issue, or is it the connection charge increases?
Connection charge increases.
Okay. I'll have him talk a little bit more in detail with that tonight.
Okay.
Yeah, just for clarification.
Oh, okay.
That's the main thing.
Other items that maybe council has some inquiries on, that can be prepared for the meeting, or administration may be able to answer now. See any others?
That's all for me.
So that's the agenda that was presented. There may be a follow-up inquiry that council may have had from previous work session, opportunity to ask Vince for, or something to bring back at the next work session. If not, we don't need to sit here if we don't have any other items. Second, I don't see any. All right, well, thank you, Vince, for the work session items and the discussion, and so it's about 10 to 7, but our city council meeting will start at 7:30, so we'll meet up back here. Thank you.